Dear person watching this, I want to talk to you about sandwiches. Now stick with me here. I like a thick, meaty sandwich, at least 3 meats. Chuck some cheese in there, some nice tiger bread, perfectly salted salad, maybe some garlic aioli. Well, Dying Light to me is basically that perfect sandwich, but it only has 2 meats, and the bread is just plain white Hovis. No, brown Warburtons. The missing meat is the story, and the bread is just the overall refinement of the game. Like, you've got everything else. The gameplay and the level design is pretty solid for the meats, and the mechanic works. Sometimes. That's the salad, I guess. And then the garlic aioli is the end game of it all that just works. I'll stop with this analogy now, because it's pretty dumb, and it's also making me hungry.
His tummy sounds angry, Daddy.
Yeah, that's his stomach eating itself.
What I'm trying to get to is that I've played Dying Light before a couple years ago, and it just didn't click with me. The story just tore me down so much that the gameplay didn't feel worth it anymore. And it's a conversation worth having when a bad story makes a good gameplay a dull experience.
No TV and no beer make Homer something something.
My goal with the Struggling to Love series is to force myself to play a game to completion, and do as much as I can in my power without modding the game to find enjoyment, or dare I say, true love. Hey, it worked for Resident Evil. Why not Dying Light? The year is 2013, and 12-year-old me finds a new gameplay video of an upcoming zombie game called Dying Light. I thought it looked awesome. I was a preteen, and like most, I was super into parkour and freerunning at the time. Put that together with zombies and it seemed like a perfect match. The game came out a couple years later and flew under my radar until 2019, when a few of my friends at university kept telling me to play it. So I did. We did a few missions together, I did a fair few solo, I ended up getting a hacker into my game somewhere near the end that gave me practically infinite medkits and parts to repair my weapons, so it became pretty trivial. They gave me some super overpowered gear too. Oddly enough, this made the game more fun. I'd seen my friends flying around with a grappling hook and climbing buildings so fast and being able to run just so much farther and faster than I could. It looked awesome and like a lot of fun, and it ruined the game for me. Okay, not really, but it made me excited to get to that stage, and I never did. The progression was way too slow. I didn't even reach cool abilities in the skill trees like the grappling hook. The most fun I could have was vaulting over zombies, though I can't complain because that's also one of the coolest things to do. By the time I'd beaten the main game, I felt no motivation to keep going other than to get that cool fun stage of free running. What's the point if I then have no missions to absolutely demolish them with, other than some shitty side quests? When I beat the game, I left it untouched for a couple years until the sequel came out. I've not played it yet, but at first glance it looks like the sandwich has evolved. It looks like it's still missing the meat of the story, but the bread is better, and there's like a nice crisp pickle on top with some melted cheese. And look, what I'm getting at is that it got me interested in the Dying Light franchise again. I don't have enough cash to throw at a new release, so I'll try the first game again and see how I fare this time. Well, I made some pretty controversial decisions at the start of my game. I already knew that I didn't like the story and that it partly ruined my enjoyment of the game, so I skipped almost all cutscenes. Also, I spent a bit of time at the start of the game grinding to get my survivor rank a bit higher. This is the rank that gives you access to abilities on this skill tree. The abilities are mostly shit, to be honest. Small incremental stuff. You can get a few more inventory slots, use a few extra traps, and get access to some crafting things. But then in the middle of the shit, you get the camouflage ability, which is literally that scene from the first season of The Walking Dead. It's fucking incredible, and trivializes most of the game if you use it properly. As well as that, it's how you get the fucking grappling hook. Now, I've heard that in Dying Light 2, the grappling hook is nowhere near as useful, but at least you get it through the main story of the game. The fact that I managed to complete the game without even unlocking this ability is actually insane. I wanted that shit, so I grinded for it before completing any story missions. Does it ruin the game? Fuck no, it doesn't. It made the game much more enjoyable, to be honest. There are a few games where being overpowered as shit is just so much more fun. As much as I love playing Doom Eternal on Ultraviolence on Nightmare, there's credit and fun to be had with playing on I'm Too Young to Die. If I remember correctly, I played Wolfenstein 2 on Can I Play Daddy, and I had more fun with it than some of my other friends did with the higher difficulties. Being a badass is fun, even if it requires being a pussy first. And I might as well mention here that I decided to play a normal difficulty in this game. I still want to have some challenging encounters, but I'd sooner shove a light bulb up my arse than raise the difficulty for some arbitrary reason. There's no achievements up for grabs anyway. In Dying Light, we play as Kyle Crane, a member of the Global Relief Effort, or the GRE, sent to Haran to complete a few tasks. The main objective is to hunt down a guy called Kadir for a file that was stolen from the GRE. So I arrived in Haran and got introduced to our supporting cast, a bunch of survivors living in a tower. I skip a few cutscenes and change the graphic settings to not look like dog shit. This game's depth of field effect is so horrible. It literally blurs anything beyond recognition if it's not in the dead center of your screen. I skip a few more cutscenes and then find out I have to check for a lost survivor on the 13th floor of the tower. For the most part, I hate when this game has its slow sections, but I have to admit that the introduction to the horror aspects of the game really hit hard. This environment design is actually amazing, and I love it even more for interrupting one of these scenes where you do nothing but stand still while the screen turns blue. This happens so often in the game that it honestly feels like a joke. You'll have a really cool mission doing some free running and then your character just stops, pulls out his radio and the screen turns blue. I don't know what it's meant to represent, but it's annoying. And the scenes had absolutely nothing that couldn't be explained while still keeping me in control of the character. Anyway, I skip a few more cutscenes and begin the free running tutorial with Rahim. For the first half of the game, this is supposed to be like your best friend of sorts. He's the quirky, younger, athletic guy that actually gives decent banter. Well, decent might be pushing it a little bit.
Not bad for a noob.
This is the first example of the game showing its below average writing. There are so many stupid lines throughout the course of this game that it's actually kind of funny. I specifically remember my first time playing through this game and my friends told me not to skip a specific scene, telling me it was absolutely vital that I witnessed it. The actual free running tutorial does a pretty good job of introducing you to the controls. It's not overly slow like some tutorials and it gives you a decent amount of freedom. It does show its jank pretty much straight away too. Throughout the course of the game, you'll have a fair few moments whereby grabbing onto ledges just won't work, and you'll fall long distances, often to your death. It's kind of ironic too, since it's also entirely possible to grab onto ledges that really shouldn't be grabbed onto. Anytime you see a bookshelf or a cabinet in the corner of a room, it usually means you can climb on top of it to get out of bounds. It's really this easy. I'll forgive it though. If this is the payment for having a first-person movement system like this, then I'll take it. The movement system starts out pretty basic, like a trimmed down version of Mirror's Edge. You can run, jump, vault and climb. The more you perform these actions, the more points you can put into your agility skill tree. At first, the skill tree seems pretty focused on movement during combat, but eventually you can upgrade your stamina and get some new abilities like a weird wall jump that feels kind of pointless, the ability to negate fall damage with a roll, and then best of all, the ability to jump on enemies. By the time I'd finished the game, I was only around level 12, halfway through the progression. On one hand, it's nice to know that I could come back and still level up, though some of these upgrades would just make it so much more fun to play the game through, and I really didn't want to spend another couple of hours doing the same thing over and over and over just to grind a number up to 25. It works out nicely that you can carry over all your skill levels into the DLC called The Following, though that's not really the kind of gameplay that you can increase your agility too much with. We'll get back into that later. So the people at the tower that you're staying at and helping out send you on some assignments like arming traps that will be available for use. It's kind of slow, but again, it's just to get you used to the controls. It's scripted, the daylight fades as you're completing the mission. Characters keep telling you that you can't be out at night and that you need to return or find a safe house overnight, but they don't really tell you why. It's a nice bit of world building that helps build tension. As nighttime approaches, your sole mission becomes to find shelter. This is one of the most memorable missions in the game. It's pitch black, you're not entirely comfortable with your free running abilities, and your torch is your only friend. The noises you hear are a lot more threatening now, more aggressive, and it's genuinely scary. Because of the common trope that zombies are stronger at night, the player instinctively will try to avoid nighttime for a safer experience. Upon finding shelter, this happens. You don't get too much of a glimpse at it before it vanishes, but what you do see is a nice introduction to different zombie types. Yeah, you've just fought a bigger zombie, but it really doesn't pose too much of a threat in terms of fear factor. The game doesn't explain what it is until you've seen it later in the game. It's really nice world building again. Morning comes, and it's time for more side quests, or side quest rather. I only did one side quest in the entire game. This side quest was an absolute joke. The developers really got a chance to show their terrible sense of humour. Some of you might know which quest I'm talking about already, and it's Mother's Day. You're told at the tower about somebody called Ghazi who might have some painkillers. You travel all the way to the other end of the slums to meet up with the guy. He then says this.
Nobody happy, so you better make Mama happy. Crane? Crane rhymes with train, and brain, and sane, and grain, and rain, and plane, and the other kind of plane, and... Because you're supposed to bring my movie about me. It's called Charlie, and it's all about me, and how smart I am. Don't argue with Guzzy. It doesn't work. That's what the drugstore people say.
I feel like they wanted this to be like a Borderlands-esque interaction, but it just falls so flat on its face. You go and get Ghazi the things he wants, and then you get to go inside his house. You find out that his mother is this thing. Gotta admit, mildly entertaining. But at the end of the day, this was just a stupid fetch quest with no actual substance. It did not set a good precedent for the rest of the side quests. This video is already going to be long enough without me wasting hard drive space recording menial tasks. Right, so we're infected, along with a bunch of other people, cause zombie apocalypse, and we have to go find Antizin. It's a drug that reverses and halts off the infection. Note that it's not a cure, it just stops you from turning for a while. Throughout Haran, there are occasional airdrops that can contain small amounts of Antizin, alongside some packages to level up your survivor rank. We're sent to go raid an airdrop, but unfortunately there's nothing in it. It's getting dark again, but you spot a plane flying overhead that drops another. It's at the point where you need a torch to see properly, but you decide to go and raid it anyway for the benefit of the tower. The fellas that sent you to Haran in the first place give you a call. They tell you to chuck away the Antizin, and there's a bloke called Rice that you should go and meet. He's the new target instead of Kadir. You burn the Antizin, saving only a little bit, and inform the tower that you've not found any at all. Granted, they're a bit upset, but they're more bothered now about you getting back safe. It is nighttime after all, and here we are. The introduction to the volatiles. These bastards are terrifying. They're fast, and they make the nighttime sections of this game so fucking amazing. This is the only thing from my original playthrough that genuinely stuck with me as being thoroughly enjoyable. Granted, they're easier to escape with a grappling hook, but you know what? I'd limit myself from using it at times just so that I could have the thrill of them chasing me. It's worthwhile as well, since all XP gained is doubled at nighttime. My only real complaint is that I wish the nighttimes were longer, at least on normal mode. The length of daytime is around an hour, but then nighttime only lasts 7 minutes. Of course, you can always sleep through the daytime to advance it to night, but then you'd have to keep doing that if you want it to always be night. It wouldn't make much sense, but I'd love it if the game could have an always nighttime mode. Like, I suppose the game does look pretty nice throughout the day, but I'm all about that atmosphere, and this game is drenched in it for almost all sections that require a torch. After returning to the tower, I took some time to clear out some safe houses. It's the standard affair that you probably know and love to hate from practically every Ubisoft game. I will say Dying Light pulls off the climb a satellite tower cliche a lot better than other games, mostly due to the parkour system. It's also fun that you can jump off these towers and land on a car or in a pile of bins to negate all fall damage. I'm unsure how landing on a van can prevent me from breaking every bone in my body, but it's one of the better design choices at show. I grinded my agility level up a bit here too while making my way to Rice's base to introduce myself. Now, Rice actually makes a pretty good impression. He's not a bad villain, all things considered. The overall story of the game is lacking and is almost entirely uninteresting, but at least the villain has a bit of charm. His voice acting is quite good too. To get on his good side, we need to do some random tasks. This is getting quite familiar. The main goal is to turn on a transmitter from a tower. It involves climbing 2 separate satellite towers, one of which I'd literally just done while clearing the safe houses. Rice then sends us out to meet a few couriers on opposite ends of the map for some pickups of protection money. I'd complain about this mission too, since it's again just more menial tasks, but this is where you're most likely to be introduced to the bridge. It's such a fun part of the map. There are so many zombies just huddled together here, and it's really great fun to craft different types of bombs and molotovs to throw into groups. It's fun traversing the bridge too once you have access to an ability to vault over people, or zombies rather. There's one big downside, and that's really an optimization issue. Because of the amount of entities on the screen at any one time, to prevent the game from lagging, most of the zombies that aren't immediately next to you become incredibly weak, stupid, and sometimes invincible. Sometimes they'll just pop into existence from nowhere. It's a bit distracting. It'd have been nice to have some control over how much the game does stuff like this, since a modern PC won't have anywhere near as many issues with running it. After all of this anyway, we've become acquainted with Rice, and he gives us some antizin for the tower. You go back to the tower and then witness that particular scene I mentioned earlier. It's meant to be so emotional and heavy hitting, but it just makes me laugh. I've checked online to see some other people's opinions of this scene, and while I've found some examples of people appreciating the scene unironically, the general consensus seems to be that this is ridiculous. I think the voice acting's fine. It's just the animation and the music and the actual words coming out of this man's mouth. Moving on, Jade from the tower says we should be able to find some antizin in the school, since the GRE isn't sending in any of their airdrops now. You then have a pretty action-focused section going through the school fighting off Rice's men. Here, the game honestly feels decently balanced. I have a sword for some reason, and this sword can kill things in one hit for the most part. It feels like it makes sense, and even better, it feels badass. Inside the school, you find a bunch of explosives and another one of those green guys from the first night. You go find the doctor to ask about the green fellas, and you're tasked with getting a tissue sample from them. This sample is another introduced game mechanic that ultimately means nothing. You're supposed to sneak up on the green guys to get a tissue that can help with crafting, or sell it. The issue is that you barely even see any of the green guys. Yes, I know they're called bolters, but still, you barely even see them. The next mission was supposed to be to use the explosives on some volatile nests. Unfortunately, Rahim, the guy from the freerunning tutorial, decided to go and do it himself. Obviously he fails and you have to go do it anyway because you're the main character and that's what the main character does. This part's pretty memorable too, to be honest. You have to plant explosives in a big concrete structure before the already planted explosives go off, ruining the whole plan and killing you in the process. It's pretty tense. It's a nice way for you to show off what you've learned in regards to the movement system. Rahim turns into a zombie before you get back and you have to put him out of his misery. It's again supposed to be a really shocking and emotional scene. It even plays sad piano music. The only issue is that we've not spent enough time with him to care. We've been spending more time with his older sister than anything. It's hard to feel sorry for the guy when he caused it in the first place by being an idiot. No time to stay sad anyway. We have to go defend the doctor's lab from Rice's men. For me, I completed the mission and then exploded. I can't figure out why. I've watched this clip like 5 times trying to figure it out, but no success. Despite that, they've taken the doctor hostage, so we gotta find him at Rice's base. Here is where guns become a bit of a problem. Up until now, everyone has just been throwing knives at you or running up to you with a sword for some reason. It worked because you had the exact same weapons as your enemies. By giving the enemies guns, while I'm still using swords, I feel like I'm at a disadvantage. Obviously our greatest weapon is still going to be kicking enemies off of buildings, but I will always hate this part of the game that becomes more like a shooter. You go through the base, eventually getting your own gun, and it does not feel satisfying at all. I avoid using this thing at all costs. There's parts of the game that practically force you to use a gun, mainly when an enemy has one too. In the time it takes to run up to an enemy with them shooting at you, you're gonna lose almost all your health. By staying back and shooting at the enemies, not only is it boring and sluggish, but it feels like a waste of time when the enemies decide they never want to leave cover. The AI on these bastards is painful. They hide behind pillars and half walls, very rarely popping their head up for a brief second. Sometimes they just get behind a wall and start lobbing grenades from an infinite pool. You're almost guaranteed to get hit a fair amount while you get used to the gameplay, so you're gonna need some medkits. You can craft these on the go, and you're not gonna run out of supplies for them unless you try. The issue is, however, that crafting one takes the absolute piss. You have to open up the menu, scroll through some UI very clearly designed for a controller, then select to craft one. Wait through this crafting time, press enter to confirm that the item has been crafted. Why can I not just press a button and bam, it already be crafted? Why can I not just automatically craft a medkit upon attempting to use one? I have the supplies. I find the doctor, but then get ambushed by Race and shove him into the pit. Now, some people like this mission. I do not. Everything is taken from you, and you're forced to fight for Rice's amusement in a pit. The issue is that the weapons you have access to are shit and not fun to use. The enemies feel so tanky when using these weapons too. The one redeeming factor is that if you die, you can just try again without losing too much progress at all. I don't necessarily mind the fight against the Demolisher. I think that's a fine fight, and he doesn't have too much health. I was using the camouflage mechanic throughout the pit in order to stop smaller zombies from attacking me whilst I dealt with the Demolisher, and it pretty much breaks the mission. You have to stand around waiting for this guy up here to realise you even exist. The escape section is kind of crap too. It's one of those things where it feels pretty potluck if you get hit or not. I imagine it's torture on higher difficulties. This is pretty much the halfway point of the game too, which means it's time for a new map to play around in. Or at least it would be, if this guy would hurry up. This sums up what I hate about the game the most. Like, think about what we just did. We had an intense section running away from the main villain, who had stripped us of all our gear and forced us to fight for his own benefit. Now, we're standing around in a sewer, waiting for some random guy. That means absolutely nothing to the grand plot, as he walks slowly through a sewer. Look at this bullshit. I know that downtime is an important factor in a game, but Jesus Christ, Dying Light doesn't know when to hurry up. This could be a fun action ROM with these really cool horror elements, but then it gets interrupted by one of the most bland stories, uninteresting characters, and stupid shit like this. Fucking hurry up already! Fuck me! Through the sewer we go. We have to do some more bullshit with guys with guns, and then we make our way to Sector 0. This is the new playground. Rather than being pretty low to the ground like in the slums, we're now going to be multiple stories high, running along rooftops. I will say I prefer how this area looks. The lighting works really well with the environment, even through the day now. It's a really impressive space, and the game could have easily gone away with not including all of this. Props to the developers for putting in the extra effort here. You can see they really enjoyed making this game, and that they're proud of their craft. I go around and do some more safe houses now, as they can be pretty fun. The main safe house is a big tower that acts as a little hub. You return here after missions for rewards and to talk to the characters. One of the characters is Troy. I think we met them earlier or something, but I can't really remember her. She tells us that Jade from the tower is over at the university, so we go there. Then we got told to meet some guy in the sewers. I was so bored of the cutscenes I completely skipped past what was actually happening here. Gameplay wise, it was run from point A to point B, back to point A, then to point C. I meet this Michael guy who gives me some explosions and sends me off to blow up an apartment building from some very specific rooms. This is actually a pretty enjoyable mission too. It can be difficult to navigate sometimes, but it never gets too bad. There's this one apartment that you walk into and get the absolute shit scared out of you by this baby thing that would feel right at home in the evil within. The zombies here are feeling a lot tankier again since we're not finding any better weapons than the ones we had before. It's kind of a chore to kill them, so from here I mostly started to avoid killing them where possible. The mission ultimately comes to nothing. No big finale, you just sort of leave the way you got in and go talk to Jade again. She's been kidnapped by Rice and is being held at the museum. Go see the museum curator to say hi, I guess, and then make your way to the museum. The way in is through this flooded underground tunnel, and can I just stress again how nice this environment is. Like, this is a slower bit of the game, but I can't help but enjoy it just because of how atmospheric it is. It shows that the developers really do know how to properly implement downtime. It's just a shame that it always doesn't work in the game's favour. Unfortunately, after getting into the museum, you have more shooty bang bang. I begin to really miss the melee combat at this point and even attempt it with some of the enemies after getting frustrated that they wouldn't leave cover. It didn't work out. This section goes on for a while as well. Nothing but running from room to room, shooting people and hiding in cover. I can't stress enough how bad the guns feel to use. Okay, that feels a bit harsh since it's not that they feel bad, it's more that they just don't feel good. You can get headshots, but the recoil is a little whack, and the sight isn't always as accurate as I'd like. It reminds me a bit of trying to use a gun in VR for the first time, and having to really focus in order to hit anything. This room though, I like. It's one of the rooms of the game that stuck with me. There's not really anything special about it, but it just looks cool, I guess, with all the zombies standing around. It helps show that Rice is maybe just a little power hungry by keeping all these infected in an enclosed space, able to be viewed like animals in a zoo. We find Jade. Rice sends some zombies at us, and we find out that Jade was bitten just a while ago. Rice gives us a single antizen and leaves it up to us to decide who gets to use it. Then, for some fucking reason, one of these fucking sections. I hate these. Why are they in every game nowadays? It's so slow, walking from point to point. The infamous cutscene even gets referenced again.
No, shit. No.
Because why not? None of this has any emotional weight to it at all. It's just irritating. It ends with Jade giving you the antizen, her turning and you snapping her neck. Granted, this is more emotional than Raheem's death, but only because we've actually spent a fair amount of time with Jade at this point. Boss fight time anyway, against Tahir, Rice's main man. It's a decent fight, I guess, machete versus machete. I almost died here, but just about killed him last second, and earned the pleasure of walking very slowly back out of the museum. I don't think these floor reflections are working properly. After all of this, we go back to meet Troy, who sends us to a radio tower to install an amplifier and send a message out stopping some jets from bombing the city. The GRE contacts us and tells us to get the doctor's research so that we can escape Haran. I'm trying my absolute hardest to make this part of the video not feel rushed, but it's so damn difficult when the actual story of the game feels rushed at this point. I know that a lot of changes were made to Dying Light shortly before its release, like changing the playable character count down from 3 to only 1, and removing a lot of sections. I'm guessing that this later part of the game was the most heavily affected by all of this, because it at least feels that way. Anyway, there's a new doctor in town now that's been holed up inside of a clinic for a while. We fight our way through the infected inside the labs to find him, and pass on the progress towards the cure that was previously made. All we have to do now is get some more data and the cure should be completed. Rice has this data on a CD, because of course he does. He invites us over to challenge him at the top of his tower. We take him up on his offer and head towards him. This is now the final mission, and it's kinda cool. To get to Rice's tower, you have to go through the sewers one last time, but the infected are really fed up of you going through there by now. As was I. Volatiles start chasing you through the sewers, in a sequence that is so much better than the pit escape sequence earlier on. The music feels super tense, it actually feels fair and well scripted, and best of all, there's no pricks with guns. It's then a case of making your way to the top of the tower by means of an elevator, and then some parkour. There are some zombies on the way, but by this point you might as well be hitting them with a slab of butter. And here he is, Rice, the main villain. We've had a few bosses so far, like the Demolisher in the pit, and then Tahir. So how's this fight gonna go down? Why? With quick time events, of course. Fucking fantastic! I love me some quick time events, bloody love them. They haven't existed for the entire fucking game, and now all of a sudden we have to beat the main villain with them. Sure, why not? And that's it. We beat the guy with quick time events and then tell the GRE to sod off. What a shit way to end a game. Like, we don't even get to see the aftermath of our results or meet up again with some of the side characters to see how they're doing. It just ends. Clearly, the developers thought the same. Or maybe they just had some really interesting ideas, because they came out with a direct sequel DLC called The Following. Now, it's officially called a DLC, but I honestly feel like this could have been released as its own game, or at the very least have been given the old school term of an expansion pack. The following is amazing. I'd not played the following before this, but I owned it as part of the Enhanced Edition, which, side note, is a steal, especially with the price this thing goes down to in sales. The following starts with a quote from my favourite Frankenstein film, which is actually a really nice introduction to this DLC, and sets the tone fairly well.
I have love in me the likes of which you can scarcely imagine, and rage the likes of which you would not believe. If I cannot satisfy the one, I will indulge the other.
It doesn't necessarily make sense before playing, but by the end this is actually just a cool little quote with some nice parallels. The DLC starts with you learning about a cultist group that is able to completely survive the virus, and potentially even control it. It's also convenient that we just so happen to need some antizin, because we're always in need of antizin, so we set off to the countryside to find some, as well as some information about the cult. We start in the sewers below Haran on our way outside of the city. It's really just a plot device to lead us to this view, showing us the map we're going to be exploring for the next few hours. It's worth it too. This map is amazing. I wasn't kidding when I said this DLC is massive. It's literally twice the size of the two maps we've already seen. It's arguably even more beautiful. Gone are the days of jumping along rooftops and hanging out in the slums hitting zombies with wooden planks. Now, bigger isn't always better, especially if traversal becomes more of a chore. Luckily, we're able to find some locals at a farm that ends up acting like a hub, kind of like the tower from the main game. One of the first characters you meet sends you on a mission to a local farm to steal a car. This is Khan, and I don't know what it is about this guy, but I love him. This might be a first for Dying Light characters. He's interesting. His sense of humour isn't intended for 10-year-olds, and well, he tells you where to get a car. It's a shame then that this game has carried on the tradition of enemy encounters being firearm focused. Switching to my trusty bat did help in some situations, but so many enemies like to climb up water towers and just empty their magazines on you. It doesn't matter much though, because my disappointment with the combat changed when I got the vehicle. It doesn't control amazingly, but it's a car that I can ram into zombies. It's a little slow and it likes to get damaged a lot, but this is where the new skill tree comes in. Driving for long periods of time, ramming into zombies, creating destruction, and completing driving challenges all give you driving XP. When you level up your driving level, you can spend the points on allowing the crafting of better parts. Unlike the skill levels in the base game, it feels well balanced. I actually ended up progressing quite far into the skill tree, unlocking most of the things I wanted. I ended up with a fully upgraded vehicle by the end of the DLC too. As for the other skill trees, you keep your progress from the main game, along with any weapons, and continue to earn XP towards them. I will admit, it's nice to get a few extra levels out of my agility and combat ranks, and try get some new moves and techniques. It's nothing crazy though, and it won't completely change the way you play the game. We go back to the farm to see Khan, but he's been kicked out by the leader. We find this out because the daughter of the leader, Ezgi, tells us. This woman woke up in the middle of a zombie apocalypse and was like, I'm gonna put on my black slouchy Moonlight Hunters t-shirt, my blue ripped jeans featuring a chain to hold my own mascot, big dark brown combat boots, my wristband, finish it off with the studded collar around my neck, and of course I put my hair in a kind of Celtic twist, partly dyed pink to show how cool and angsty I am. Because Khan's gone, we think it's a good idea to gain the trust of the locals by doing all the jobs they can't be asked to do, or are scared to do. You can gather a bunch of side quests that are actually fairly enjoyable here, or you can push on with the main task of heading to a water supply pumping station, fighting your way through, and turning back on the water. It's funny to note that this is probably one of the worst quests available to you right now, but it's the only one mandatory to progress. Kinda. See, this is where the DLC properly begins, and you're introduced to trust points. You do side quests for the locals, and your trust level goes up. Once your trust reaches the suitable level, you'll get contacted about the next main mission, most likely by Jazir, the guy that owns the farm. On paper, this sounds horrible. A mechanic that makes you do side quests in order to continue with side quests sounds like the worst thing ever. but then in practice I'm surprised. I never really felt like I was going out my way to do shit that I really didn't want to do. The characters on the farm actually have personalities. Not the annoying Borderland wannabe personalities either, but actual genuine personalities. They react to the side quests you take on. Some of the missions directly concern the locals, and you can actually notice their trust in you being gained. Anyway, we've restored the water and the farm is super thankful. From exploring the countryside and of course from Kyle Crane's totally not annoying exposition, we've now learnt that the locals can be protected by someone called the Mother. She has some cult members that will communicate on her behalf, called the Faceless. Let me tell you, their designs are pretty cool. It's also really weird to see them in this universe. I mean, the main game was a fairly grounded game as far as zombies games go, and now we've got cult members. It's definitely jumping the shark, but as somebody that found the main game dull, and when one of the main complaints about the game is how bad the story is, I can't complain. The next mission is pretty much just a mission to go and do more side missions so that you can talk to one of the Faceless. The name of the mission is pretty cool. Stranger in a Strange Land, being referenced to a really awesome book and a really great song. It's probably more a reference to the book, which is basically about a guy from Mars that comes to Earth. It has a lot of heavy religious themes, as you kind of expect, but most importantly, the book was actually rumoured to be affiliated with Charles Manson and the Manson family. Fitting. And a major red flag about the legitimacy of the following. We talk to the Faceless and get invited to a ceremony. This is where we meet the Mother. Oh, 1. This environment design is again fucking gorgeous, and 2, how cool is this shit? It turns out that all of this stuff about being immune to the virus is more than true. The zombies literally ignore you during this section. Man, I love this DLC if you can't tell. If for whatever reason you're watching this and haven't played the DLC, please do. Please don't continue watching this, just go and play the DLC, I promise. Even if the religious themes aren't for you and you hate the cult, you'll still have some dumb fun driving around in a car mowing down zombies. This is basically the point where your trust level becomes a little more ominous than it first seemed. You started as an outsider, then a stranger, then a newcomer. Normal, right? Then you're an ally, but not to the locals like you might have originally thought, but to the Faceless. Then you become a believer, seen as a member of the Children of the Sun, and finally, you'll become a disciple. It's not subtle at all, since big pop-ups appear on your screen every time you advance to the next level. But I can't help but love this small shift. If you can't tell, we're joining the cult. To do this, more side quests. I will admit the DLC slows down a fair bit here. I won't cover any of the side quests to stop this from being too long of a video, but you have to do a fair amount of them. And the little bits of main quest that you're treated with basically amount to a cutscene before you're told to go do more side quests. It's lucky I was invested in getting my driving rank up higher, and that the driving is satisfying enough. Otherwise, it's possible the game would fall flat here. During the side quests, you'll probably come across some of Rice's men from the base game, hanging about and shooting people. So far, they've not really been involved in the story. They've not even been seen in the countryside. When you come across this, Kyle Crane rings up the Faceless to let them know about the gang. Here we meet Attila. This guy is cool. He's got some cool mystery about him, and he's well voice acted too. He lives inside of the mansion that is totally not annoying to get in and out of. Attila sends us on a quest to some different cult places marked on our map, before finally sending us to the Temple of the Sun. I do wish the game had more moments like this. Climbing up cliff sides to reach a gorgeous view. The game is absolutely full of spectacular views, but you kind of spend too much time on the ground driving about. I can't complain too much because you are at the very least driving about, but just look at this place. The art team deserved a raise because of this. We grab this mask by order of Attila, give it to him, do a bunch more side quests for the cult, and then one of the Faceless gets in contact with us again to inform us they've not heard from Attila for a while. We go back to his mansion, and he's nowhere to be found, just a note. We head down into the basement, into a cave, and there he is. Attila has killed himself, and he's wearing the mask.
That's what the mask is!
After some more side quests, the Faceless tells us that some of Rice's men are over at a granary, and that one of the cult acolytes is being held captive there. Like every good cult member, we go and kill a few dozen people in the name of our saviour. For some reason I can't really remember, or figure out from my footage or from the wiki, we now have to go to a lighthouse where we learn that this guy, Khan, that told us how to get a car, is working with Rice's men. The lighthouse gets attacked and ends up exploding. We grab these vials that, in the game's own words, might be medicine. I'm not sure if this was meant to happen, or if it was just my experience, but a volatile came along, killed most of Rice's men, allowing me to just sort of drive away in a really cool sequence. It's pretty obvious that the game just wanted to get to a cool finale, because the final mission was so ramped up out of nowhere. It didn't have much reason behind it. The gameplay was cool, so again I can't complain too much. Okay, now, finally, the Faceless tells us to go to a dam. Driving there is pretty fun due to it really being a test of how well you've upgraded your car. There's blockades, ramps, big piles of zombies, and dudes just shooting at you. After climbing up here, you find an entrance to the dam, and that's pretty much it for Dying Light the Following. At least gameplay wise. You walk through the dam and have a conversation with the mother. You're shown visions of how she came to be who she is before she finally lifts her mask for the great reveal. She's a sentient volatile. It's pretty cool. She asks if you're ready to sacrifice literally everyone in order to get rid of the virus. With how things are in Haran and following how I felt the story was progressing, I chose to say yeah. We're led into a room with a nuclear warhead, input the code we were told to remember by Attila, and then the game ends. We win, I guess. I know this is kind of what we were literally preventing in the main game, but it's a decent ending. We've given up hope of things ever getting better. We've seen how the virus will only continue to spread if something drastic isn't done about it. But this isn't the canon ending. If you say no to the offer of arming a nuclear warhead, then you get forced to drink a vial and engage in combat with the mother. Can't comment firsthand on how enjoyable this fight is, as Dying Light had an update before I managed to try this fight out and get the second ending. This update added crossplay to the game. Sounds great, right? Yeah, well, it would be if crossplay didn't just mean between Epic Games Launcher and Steam. Still sound good? Well, now consider the fact you have to log in with Epic Games just to access this feature, even if you own the game on Steam. My computer has something against Epic Games, I swear. Everything in my game is now invisible. There's floating opposing character models and I'm stuck in a death loop. I've tried exiting out, restarting from an early part of the game, tried reinstalling, nothing. It seems to me they've really broken something with their newest update. It's been almost a month with no sign of a fix. Nobody else is really reporting on this, so maybe it's just my computer that's having this issue. But it worked completely fine for years before they added Epic Games support. After the fight, you leave the dam and start having visions. You can't get in contact with anyone, so you continue on through some tunnels towards a spot just outside the quarantine zone. Then this happens. It's cool. It sort of implies that you're the whole reason the virus gets out of quarantine, and you're how the world ended up turning to shit before the events of Dying Light 2. Maybe I'll play Dying Light 2 one day to see what happens next. It got good reviews, and some of my friends seem to really like it. Again, I've heard that the gameplay is what you should really play it for, and that the story is kinda eh. Let me know your thoughts on it and if I should give it a go. For now though, that's Dying Light. Something worth talking about is how great Techland has actually been in terms of DLC and extra content, going even beyond the following. Even all the way up to Dying Light 2's release, we were getting free updates with weapons and character skins. There have been events that added new throwables, consumables, crossovers with Left 4 Dead 2, Chivalry, Rust, and Unturned of all things, all of which have added iconic weapons and sometimes even new playable character models. There have been paid DLC too to add extra skins and weapons, microtransactions if you will, but I'm okay with it here. It feels more like a way to support the developers. A lot of the time, the weapons would be unique enough too, fitting into interesting themes or having a new utility. As well as this, the folks at Techland that made Dying Light were creating another game called Hellraid. The website is still up at hellraid.com, and there's almost an hour of gameplay footage that was revealed for it. Hellraid was eventually cancelled and adopted into Dying Light as DLC. Now, it's not really well received, and it really doesn't seem like it's much fun, but the fact that this exists is honestly a triumph in my opinion. Most of the reviews seem pretty salty that this isn't a standalone experience and that it doesn't really fit the gameplay of Dying Light too well. The most common complaint is the lack of parkour. It's basically a roguelike adventure against the forces of hell, with a medieval theme to it. It honestly reminds me of Hexen. They even updated the DLC with story elements and entirely new weapons, including the bow from the main game, even wands. I'm probably not going to play this DLC. It seems like something that might be fun with a group of friends, but not something I'd really want to touch doing only single player. If you can get some people together though, there definitely does look to be some fun here. I urge you to at least give it a go. When I wrote the script, I said, I don't know if this will ever be updated again now that Dying Light 2 is out, but it literally got updated very shortly after writing that. The main game also got the update that broke everything for me, so it's not too surprising. Overall, Dying Light could have been better. I definitely enjoyed it a lot more than I did in my first playthrough, but I did have to push myself to enjoy it. I had to skip cutscenes to not get bored. I had to grind my survivor rank just to get the grapple hook. I don't think the game would have been as fun if I didn't do that. Because of this, I do have to say the same about the following DLC. I did have the grapple hook, which did make some sections less tedious to run through. I feel like I greatly benefited from having a DLC weapon in my inventory the whole time that made combat easier. It didn't necessarily trivialize things, but it did make the zombies feel like zombies as opposed to sponges. It's a fun romp through, and the car is an amazing addition to the formula. It has given me some excitement to play the sequel, and it's nice that I can actually see why people enjoy the game now. Do I think it's the best game ever? No. Do I think this is a game I'll play again? Also probably no. I've given it a month or two since playing the game before even writing this conclusion, just to let things settle. This feels like one of the most 7 out of 10 games I've ever played. By no means is it bad, but it's also only just worth your time. You're probably better off prioritizing other games over this one, and it's something that I imagine is just sitting in a lot of people's backlogs for all eternity. For those people, I will at least encourage you to play the game, if only for its DLC. If you've made it this far, thank you. I've spent way too long making this video and the script got way out of hand. This is by far and beyond the longest video I've made, but if you like what you've seen, please feel free to support the channel by subscribing and checking out some of my other content. I'm moving out soon to a place with better internet and a more comfortable workspace, so I'll be able to stream again for the first time in like 2 years. I'd love it if you could pop over to Twitch, give me a follow to keep up to date with when I start streaming again. The link to my Twitch, as well as any other videos or audio I've used or referenced, are in the video description for your convenience. Until next time, I've been Torchii. See ya.